Hi, Bill Vales here, and I'm here to tell you about an exciting new show that we've been working on at LCTV. The name of the show is Your Backyard. And on Your Backyard, we're going to take you through all the conservation trails that are in Littleton. And our guide for this is going to be the Guide to Conservation Land of Littleton, Mass. And this book was put out by the Littleton Conservation Trust, written by Art Lazarus, a longtime Littleton resident and geologist. We're very excited about this show, and we'd like you to sit back, relax, and let's see where your backyard takes you today. Here we are at the entrance to Sarah Doublet Forest. And Sarah Doublet Forest is one of the premier places in the Littleton Conservation Trust trail system. It's about 95 acres of land, and the area here is unique in that it relates to the history of our town of Littleton. But the first stop here is at this kiosk, and it gives you a description of the trails in the forest, and it also provides some maps, which are very handy. You know, it'll help you through here, and if you don't need the map, when you leave, take one as you go in, and you can put it back when you're done, or you can take it with you if you'd like. Sarah Doublet is an absolutely beautiful piece of property, and you're going to enjoy the walk through here. We're beginning our walk on the Jenkins Knapp Trail. The trails at Sarah Doublet Forest are very well developed. And as I always do, I'm bringing with us my guide to the conservation land of Littleton, Massachusetts. The Sarah Doublet Forest consists of an area of about 500 acres. That's roughly less than a square mile, actually about 0.7 of a square mile. The area that we're in here, predominantly oak. There is some pitch pine, which is not really common in Littleton. We'll point out some of that when we go further. The area is lined with some beautiful stone walls, figured to be about 150 years old. And let's continue walking. Okay, as we go through here, I see some nice low-lying yews, a few hemlock trees, which are one of my favorite trees because of their just wispy sort of nature. And another thing you can see on the hemlock tree is the nice small cone. Nice small cone. We have some white pine here and some very, very young red oak. As you can see here, they're only about 6 feet high, just starting out. And let's continue on. Okay, here's a nice cedar tree. How nice that is. That's about a foot across. And look at this, what we're coming on here. This is an old chimney. We don't see a foundation, but this is an old chimney. It looks about, boy, I want to say about 20 feet high. Done with mortar, fieldstone, mortar, and brick. The entire area is quite grown over here, which really makes me think. If I look at this tree here, here's a white pine tree. This tree probably 30 to 50 years old. So we know this is certainly older than that. Here's a good example of litter, okay, pure leaf litter, which we're going to take with us. Yeah, that always makes me lose my train of thought, but we'll take that with us. I'm looking around here to see if there's any remnants of a foundation that would outline this house. I'm assuming, or this structure, I should say. I'm assuming that this would be on the gable end of the house, and the structure would be here. I can't say I see anything. Well, I don't know. There's some larger rocks here. It's really hard to say. There is some metal here. I'm walking through a lot of cedar here. Here's some brick. Here's some metal. What are these metal pieces here? These are probably more contemporary. Oh, that looks like a bed frame, I think. Bed frame, so that would be, that a bed frame? You know, it's kind of heavy for a bed frame. This is a dump area of something. These are always very interesting to excavate. I know from doing some archaeology work that people always left interesting things in dumps. And you can find the remnants of how people lived to a certain extent, types of things that they used, and also considering the order, depending on how deep the dump goes, the order that things are piled on the dump will tell us something about what was thrown away first and what was thrown away second and third. That's that whole area of stratification. So let's see. Now, I do see a lot of brick here. Now, someone with knowledge in masonry product could look at that brick, determine probably where it was made, probably how it was fired, and whether it was used for inside walls or outside walls, because how it was fired would probably be indicative of how it deals with water in terms of repelling water or absorbing water. There's definitely brick here. Goes down among the leaf litter. Boy, there's more metal here. Maybe we need to do another show on excavating this entire area if we, just kidding here. This would be an interesting area to see what's under here. I was not able to find in any of the research I did or preparatory work for this hike about who may have lived in this building, the type of building it was. The only notations that I've seen is that this is the remnants of an old stone chimney. So let's continue on. Well, as we leave the chimney, I'm noticing here some sassafras. We have a lot of sassafras Sassafras, nature's root beer. Here's a larger sassafras tree, and it has that, here's a better one, that beautiful mitten-shaped leaf on it. And this sassafras tree is probably 40 feet high. I don't see any other large ones here, but I see a lot of pioneer size. And what I mean by pioneer is there's a natural succession with how plants grow when they take over an area. And seeing all these small sassafras looks like they're a pioneer species, that they're one of the first species that are growing in this area. I'm also seeing here not only red oak, which has the pointy leaves, but I did see some white oak, which has the more round leaf. So this is very interesting here, and we're in a clearing here. This is a clearing. So the area here, the trees are relatively young in this area, 20, 30, 40 years. But it's very striking to be in the wooded area and come out to a clearing like this. And there's the chimney. There's the chimney. What a beautiful day we have in New England to do this. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay. Once we get off the beaten path, it really becomes very quiet here. Something to notice in Sarah Doublet Forest is there's some enormous outcrops of bedrock that we're going to see. Some of it is gneiss, meaning the rock gneiss, which is a metamorphic rock, and some of it is granitic in nature, and this is more of a granitic type rock, but this is a very large bedrock, and it's, to my eye, with all the greens, and one of the things that I love on bedrock are the beautiful lichens that grow, the lichens and the mosses that grow. We have some here that are on the rock. And this bedrock is thought to be significant to why Sarah Doublet and the Nashoba Indians made this part of their homeland. This Sarah Doublet Forest is a subset of the greater Nashoba Plantation. The Nashoba Plantation was approximately 16 square miles, stretching from Littleton to current days parts of Chelmsford, Groton, even out to Lancaster, Bolton, and that whole area. And Sarah Doublet Forest is 500 acres, so it's a subset of the greater Nashoba Plantation. Now, this bedrock, and we're going to see more and more outcrops of this, is thought to be significant as a place to gather, perhaps to have ceremonies, and there's various speculation of how it was used. It's beautiful. Oh, I see some beautiful blueberries here, low bush blueberries. I think I'm going to have a couple to eat. Very good. Well, we're coming up on a beautiful stack of rocks. The stack of rocks is known as a cairn. And this looks like it's definitely man-made, no question about that. And this cairn was built to commemorate a longtime volunteer to Littleton Conservation Trust, and also many other great causes in Littleton. And the gentleman's name is Ray Grandy. And Ray passed on. This was one of the areas he loved. And this cairn was built to commemorate Ray and his efforts and contributions that he's made to the town. There's a beautiful bench here. It's a beautiful piece of wood, single board. That's a big tree. This rock is from Maine. The darker colored rock is from Maine, and it was brought down here from Maine. The capstone and the two lighter pieces in between are granite. It's a beautifully structured cairn that some effort was really made to construct this effort and time. And it's very fitting to commemorate the contributions that Ray made to the town. There is a plaque here on this bench that commemorates Ray Grandy and some of the work and contributions he's made to the town. This is a great place to pause, have a drink of water, collect your thoughts. Very, very quiet here. There are a few birds in the background. Okay. Still seeing a lot of young sassafras, and here's a beautiful example of an old stone wall. We're still on the Jenkins Knapp Trail. You can note here that the trail blaze is orange, and we're at a crossroads right here, and this crossroads represents the AT&T right-of-way. There is a right-of-way here. We're coming across a new trail marker, and it's labeled the Wunnuhew Loop. And I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correct, but Wunnuhew is the Algonquin Indian name for Sarah Doublet. Sarah Doublet is the name that the English gave her, or perhaps she took as part of the conversion into what was referred to as the Praying Indians. But Wunnuhew is her Algonquin name. And you'll take note here of this trail marker that the blaze now becomes yellow. Okay, the Jenkins Knapp was orange, and now we're yellow on the Wunnuhew Loop. As we're on the Wunnuhew Loop right now, we're going downhill a little bit, and all along the trail are a lot of outcroppings. And this granitic rock is certainly on the surface, and I'm sure it's a little like an iceberg, that there's a lot more below. We're just seeing the top of things, but we're definitely walking downhill. The history of Sarah Doublet and the people that she lived with is a very rich history, and it deserves some mention. Sarah was thought to have been born around the late 1640s. We don't know for sure, but I have seen that date referenced in several things that I've read. Around 1646, a John Eliot was charged with turning many of the Native Americans in Massachusetts to educating them in Christianity and turning them into what's referred to as praying Indians, and creating praying Indian villages. And that was around 1646, and that went on for several years. Around 1675, 1676, the King Philip's War started up, and all the Native American inhabitants in Nashoba and the greater Nashoba plantation were taken to what is now Deer Island in Boston, and they were basically imprisoned there. And many of them died there because of the harsh conditions, the harsh winter. When the King Philip's War ended, they were allowed to come back here. And in Sarah Doublet's case, she was the last praying Indian to live here. And before she died, she bequeathed this land to two, I believe they were brothers from Concord, Massachusetts. And she bequeathed the land to them because they took care of her in her final days. And she's thought, there's some records of Sarah having lived to be perhaps near 100 years. It's not clear, and there's been various, I've read different accounts of that. Worth mentioning is Nashoba, which can be spelled two different ways, Nashoba or Nashobah. That is an Algonquin term that translates into place between two waters. And the two waters that we're referring to here are Fort Pond and Nagog Pond. Okay, so that's where the term Nashoba comes from. Now, we're here at an intersection labeled the Easy Trail, and if you only have a little bit of time, short lunch break, you can take your right here, go down the Easy Trail, and that's going to loop back and take you out the way that we came in. But for our trip here, we're going to continue on the trail up here and continue on. Well, here we enter a very interesting area. This is the site of a former quarry. And even before the quarrying occurred here, there was probably substantial bedrock that made this a great place to meet, perhaps sit, and you know, who knows the conversations that went on here with Sarah Doublet and her contemporaries. The rock here, looking at the rock, this looks like granite to me, and it has some interesting joints here that are somewhat parallel. And what tells me this was quarried, other than the fact I've read it in the book, but what also tells me that this was quarried is if we look at the marks along this piece of granite here, we see these what look like drill holes here, and they seem somewhat equidistant. Well, maybe not as equal as I think. And what would happen is, if you can envision this whole area being bedrock and you wanted to split apart some granite for whatever use you wanted to use, you would drill holes in, and you could either pry your piece off, or if you were doing quarrying in the winter, what you can do is you could pour water down there and let that water freeze. And we know that water expands, and the power of water is absolutely impressive. It will move rock. And so I can tell that this has been quarried. And here's a piece here. I don't know if my old body can see here the drill marks. Now, was this quarried in modern days to build structures, as we think of structures, or was this quarrying done in days gone by for the native inhabitants to build structures for places of congregation, worship, meeting? I really don't know. But this certainly was an area of quarrying. And it's an interesting thing to stumble on as you're walking. You're walking in the woods. This is great. Nice surprise. Here's more of it here. Now we see here the difference between these rocks were split apart by natural forces, would be my hunch, where these two were not, because I can see drill holes on both sides of this rock here that actually match up very well. These holes right here, they match up very well. And something forced that rock apart after it split. However, I do not see any, that's granite. I do not see any drill holes on this. So the natural freezing and thawing over the millennia, water gets in there, freezes, separates, melts, another cycle, repeats itself, and over time the rock splits. We have to remember here that this whole area, a lot of the topography on this area does owe itself to the retreating glacier of about 13,000 years ago. That was during the Pleistocene period. So one needs to keep that in mind. But the underlying bedrock is quite impressive. And we're going to keep our eyes open here for bedrock structures that look like turtles. You keep that in mind, and we're going to be looking for turtles. I'm supposed to be talking about turtles here, but before I talk about turtles, I've just been distracted a little bit by the pitch pine. Here's some examples of pitch pine that is not common in Littleton, but there seems to be a fair amount of pitch pine in this area here. So that's interesting to note. Now, turtles are a creature that are revered in Indian folklore and tradition. And in studying about the Sarah Doublet Forest, the mention of turtles, rock formations that look like turtles, that look like the carapace or the shell of the turtle, are mentioned numerous times. And as I looked over here, I was struck by how a turtle is looking right at me. Now, I have been known to let my mind wander a little bit. However, I really didn't need to go all that far to construct the vision of a turtle there. And my videographer can also vouch for me, because he thought it was a turtle too. Okay, we've encountered more outcrops of granite and gneiss. And now I'm heading down, and I'm looking here at, looks like black birch, and you really need to watch your step here. This is loaded with white pine needles and acorns, which act like marbles beneath your feet. So this is very slick. That's why I love my ski poles. It saves on my knees. This definitely goes down a bit. Okay. Beautiful area. We're in a small stand of large white pine and also some hemlock. And here's a white pine that was struck by lightning in 2001. And you can see that didn't fare very well. Well, just walking along, we come upon this red oak tree, and I've noticed here that it looks like some sort of, perhaps a white pine has died, fallen off. And look at how the red oak has grown over it. And that's in there. Now, I have to believe that this tree died not that long ago. Not that long ago yet. This has been covered up fairly quickly, in geologic terms, by this red oak tree. And boy, that's definitely in there. Interesting thing to see. Okay, we're just going past that fallen tree there, which upon further investigation, we determined that the fallen tree is red cedar. So that's highly resistant to rot. So that tree had probably been there for a while the red oak was growing around it. But we see here, we're on the back side of this quarry area here. And some of the stories I've read about Sarah Doublet Forest is that these piles of rocks made a great area that could be used as a pulpit. So someone could come up here, speak to people below to get their message out. And I'm quite a bit higher than where the camera is now. And this seems like a great area for me to convey my message. So I'm conveying my message to you. This is in your backyard. As we walk through the Sarah Doublet Forest, we come upon various rock formations, cairns, stacks of rock that seem to have some order to them. These are probably modern day, but they may mark older structures that had been found here and have attempted to be reconstructed. When I was researching this area, there were two documents, I should say, that I drew on heavily to learn about the area. One was a book by John Mitchell called Trespassing, which provides a very lively description of the concept of private property, and it does focus on the Sarah Doublet Forest. Another excellent resource is a website that put together by Daniel Badillion, which provides just a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of insight about the various characteristics and what we see in the Sarah Doublet Forest and surrounding areas. I'd recommend that you check both those resources out and more. The Littleton Conservation Trust and also the Littleton Historic Society has a ton of information on the Sarah Doublet Forest, and it's absolutely significant to the history of Littleton, and it makes for a great read. All right, well, we're crossing another beautiful stone wall. A lot of quartzite in this wall. We're completing the Wunnuhew Loop, and we're entering back on the ATT right away. Now, there's a couple other trails that are part of this system. We have the Edward Bell Trail. Edward Bell, or Dr. Bell, I should say, was one of the founders of Acton Medical. And he was also a Littleton resident and a longtime supporter of Littleton Conservation Trust and many other organizations within Littleton. And there's a trail named for him, and that's off of Nashoba Road. And if we were to proceed down here, there would be, I believe, 3 vernal pools, which are interesting to look at and always a good place to fine wildlife. And then there's also the Tataguinee or Tataguinee Trail Loop, and we're going to leave that for you to explore. This is a very large area. It's very quiet. It's a great place to get out, and it's part of your backyard, so you should really come out and explore the rest of this.